Can you really get houses for free? I get tons of comments on my social media asking about real estate or private money lenders or how to do real estate without your money, or maybe if you don't want to use your own money. So in this video, I'm going to answer all those questions for you. And if you're new to my channel, my name is Austin Rutherford, born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, live in South Florida now, flipped and wholesaled hundreds and hundreds of houses, own almost 100 rental properties valued at almost $15 million. And if you want to learn more about the real estate business, go to theaustinrutherford.com. So to kick this whole thing off about rental properties and how you can get these properties for free, our first question, is that 75% on the dollar after renovations, or are you buying them at 75% on the dollar and allowing 25% of the ARV for renovations? So this is a great question. So the way that we buy rental properties today, we buy them to be all in for 75 cents on the dollar. So let me give you numbers for this. So if we're buying a house for $100,000 and it needs $50,000 of work, our all in is $150,000. Now let's say once we buy it and renovate it using other people's money, which we'll get to here in a second, that property is now worth $200,000. You take 75% of the $200,000, which is $150,000, which is how much we are all into the property for. But there's other costs associated with this, because if you're using other people's money, you have to pay them interest. Otherwise, they're not going to lend you the money. You're going to have some closing costs when you buy the house and when you refinance the house. So your all in really is probably about $160,000, $165,000 on that deal. So for it to make sense on this deal, the property would have to be worth like $215,000 to $220,000. So when you do a 75% refinance, you can actually have enough money to pay off all of your debt, including the interest and all the closing costs. And it doesn't have to be perfect here. Like let's say you're all in for like 74 cents on the dollar. On the refinance, you might get a couple $1,000s back at closing. Let's say you're all in for like 78 cents on the dollar. You might have to bring a few $1,000s to the closing table. But to put this into perspective, for that same deal, let's say the ARV was $200,000 and we're all in for $160,000. So for us to refinance that, we're going to refi the 200 grand at 75%, which is $150,000. So the bank's going to give us back 150 grand. We're going to pay off our private money lender of 150 grand, but there's still $10,000 that we would have to bring to closing. But on that same deal, we only need to bring 10 grand instead of a $50,000 down payment. So they can still be good deals. But if you want to get into these houses net zero for free, you want to be all in for less than 75 cents on the dollar. So you might be sitting there saying, well, Austin, that sounds great, but like, how do I get the money in the first place? So our next question here is, how can you secure private investment? Like, where do I even start? And this can be an entire video in and of itself. But for the quick answer here, how can you secure private money lenders? It's from talking to people. It's from networking with people. It's for giving people the opportunity to invest with you. If nobody knows what you do, nobody's going to invest with you, right? These private money lenders are not like banks or institutions. They're not these big, people on the street with offices. It's not them, right? Private money lenders are everyday people just like you and I that have some money or have some retirement or have some cash in the bank or have some equity in their home or have some cash value life insurance policy. They have access to money. And then you build a relationship with that person. It's 100% relationship based. It's one-on-one, you to them. There's no businesses, there's no entities involved, there's no underwriting guidelines, there's none of that. You don't need credit, you don't need income, you don't need proof of income, you don't need any of those things. I was able to raise $250,000 at the age of 21 years old to flip my first house. A $74,000 purchase, $170,000 rehab, raised about $250,000 to fund that deal, bought it, renovated it, sold it, paid everybody off with none of my money, and then I was able to keep and take home over $100,000 in profit, not using any of my own money. So the question is, how do you find them? You talk to everybody. You present the opportunity to everybody. You network with everybody, and you give them the opportunity to invest with you. You don't ask them, you give them the opportunity. And again, there's so much more on private money, the how-to, the where to find them, the how to talk to them, the frequently asked questions, the documents, the security, all that stuff. So if you want to learn about that, make sure you check out this video up here. Which leads to our third question. Do you have to pay the private money lender back or anything in return to them? How exactly does that work? The answer is yes, absolutely. Nobody's going to lend you money unless it's a family friend that wants to see you succeed. Nobody's going to lend you money without an ROI, a return on investment. So when people lend you money, they do expect more money back in return. It's 100% negotiable. I've seen people pay as little as 3 or 4% interest, and I've seen people pay as high as 12, 16, 20% interest. The big thing here is not the cost of the money that's important, it's the availability of the money that's important. So for my deal that I gave you an example of earlier where I made over $100,000, I paid my lender 12% interest. What if they're like, Austin, I don't want 12%, I want 16%. On that deal, I would have made 90 grand instead of 100 grand. So it's not the cost of the money that's important, it's the availability of having the money to then go out and do deals, right? So, but to answer the question, yes, you do have to pay interest to these lenders, and there's two ways you can do this. You can pay monthly interest payments. So let's say you borrow $100,000 at 12% interest. That's $1,000 a month in interest that you have to pay these lenders. Or you can let all the money accrue until the sale of the property. And then once you sell the property, then you pay all your principal and all your interest accrued on the sale and or the refinance. If you want to refinance and keep it as a rental, you pay it off on the refinance or the sale of the property. And this kind of leads into question number 4. The question is, can you explain how draws work with a hard money lender? I was under the impression they would just give me a line of credit. So to differentiate the two really quick, a hard money lender and a private money lender. Private money lenders, like we discussed, is 100% relationship based. It's one-on-one, it's you building a relationship with somebody, and it's 100% negotiable. Hard money lenders are institutions that lend money to people for investing in real estate. So they have underwriting guidelines, they do credit checks, they do income verifications, they do appraisals on the deal. You have to bring money to the deal. Private money can fund 100% of these deals. Hard money lender, you have to bring some money to the deal. So real quick, those are the differences between the two. Private money lender, when you buy the house, and you, for that same example we talk about, 100K purchase, 50K rehab, you borrow $150,000, you get $50,000 at closing in your bank account to go out there and fund the renovation. That's why I love private money. It's so much easier to work with. Now to put into perspective how it works on the hard money lending side. So let's say again, 100K purchase, 50K rehab. First off, the hard money lender is only gonna lend 80 to 90% of the deal in the first place. So let's call it 90%. So 90% of 150,000 is $135,000. So they're only gonna give you $135,000. So when you buy the property, you have to bring $15,000 to closing to buy the house, right? So what happens when you buy the house? You have the $100,000 purchase, which gets paid to the seller, and then there's still $50,000 to fund the renovation. The problem with hard money lenders is that they keep that $50,000 in their escrow account, and then they pay it to you as work is done on the property. So it can cause two problems here. The first problem is that you have to front the renovation as well as bringing the $15,000 to the closing table. You have to pay contractors more money out of pocket and then get reimbursed as the work is done. Or, could be better, could be worse, your contractor has to wait to get paid until he completes the work. Then you call the hard money lender, they get the property inspected, they approve the draw, they pay you the draw, and then you pay the contractor the draw. So you don't necessarily have a line of credit with them, although that money is in escrow for your property. They're not going to give you that money until the work is already done. And you don't have to do the entire $50,000 of work. You can do $10,000 of work and then request a draw and get reimbursed. And then another $10,000 of work, request a draw, get reimbursed. So you can break it up, but you do have to front the money, and or the contractor has to front the money until you get reimbursed by the hard money lender. Look, at the end of the day, there's two things. You can have results or you can have excuses. My question to you is, which one are you gonna have? Because you can only have one. And are there loopholes and workarounds to all different types of things? Absolutely, 100%. There's always workarounds to these things. Just because one person says something, don't take it as 100% truth. That might be how they do it, but it's not how everybody else does it. I'm in the process of buying another house, and I called a lender. I was like, hey, here's what the deal looks like. What are your terms gonna be? He told me the terms. They're way higher than I wanted them to be. So guess what? I'm calling another lender. I'm not taking the terms because they're too high, and I'm not giving up on my hopes and dreams because they're too high. I'm gonna find another solution. I'm gonna call other people because everybody's different, and I'm gonna get what I want at the end of the day because I'm not taking no as an answer. I'm not making excuses. Listen, I talk to people all the time and they're like, well, my market's too high. It's too expensive. You know, they're $500,000 homes. They just don't make sense as rental properties. I got news for you. There's more profit on those deals. If you live in an area that homes are only worth $50,000, you can't make $100,000 on a deal. It's impossible. It's only worth 50. But if you live in an area where they're worth $500,000, you can make $100,000 on a deal because there's enough margin on that. Just because you live in a high-priced area doesn't mean it's a bad area. What I would do is I would flip and wholesale these houses and make a ton of money up front, and then I would take my profits and then buy rental properties and maybe some other markets that aren't priced as high. So just because you're in a big market, expensive market, it's not the end of the world, I promise. Or on the flip side, people call me, I had a call yesterday. She was like, man, but you know, I just live in a market and the values just aren't really there. And I pulled up the comps when I was talking to her, and I was like, what are houses worth in the area? About $100,000? She was like, yeah, you know, give or take. I was like, that's amazing. For rental properties to only be worth, you only have to spend 100 grand to get a rental property that rents for $900 to $1,000 a month. That's tremendous cash flow, phenomenal cash flow. And guess what? In these smaller markets, there's not as much competition. You can own that market. You can be the go-to person in that market 100%. You can make money in any real estate market. The high end, the low end, whatever you want to do, there's money to be made. If people are buying houses or renting houses, which by the way is every market in the country, there is money to be made. Quit making excuses and start getting results. So comment below, let me know any questions that you have. Make sure you smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, hit the subscribe and notification bell so you can get all this content going forward. As always, appreciate you being here. We'll see you on the next one.